My parents lied to police to protect my thieving sister after she drained my bank account, so my brothers and I cut them all out for good. 2 years later, they're begging us to rebuild the family, but we're done playing their game. My parents lied to police to protect my thieving brother after he drained my bank account, so my sisters and I cut them all out for good. 2 years later, they're begging us to rebuild the family, but we're done playing their game. I am the oldest in a family of 7, 4 siblings, because my mom kept having babies until she finally got her dream son. Me and my sisters have always been pretty close, but it wasn't anything to do with our interests or even schoolwork. No, it was a trauma bond. You see, we realized pretty early on that our parents didn't give an F about us. Whenever one of us spilled anything or asked for a second plate of food, they'd always say the same thing. Why couldn't you have been born a boy? At first, they'd say it under their breaths, muttered while clearing the table or shooing us out of the kitchen. But after Liam was born, they gave up on that courtesy entirely because it was clear that he was the child they always wanted. On the first day he came home from the hospital as a newborn baby, he pushed my youngest sister Maya off the couch because he was jealous of the attention she was getting for holding him. Totally normal, and I expected my parents to simply make sure Maya was okay. So I was horrified when instead they went over and laughed at her. "Wow, Liam, you are so smart," my dad exclaimed, like his violence was something that was inexplicably beautiful, something to be filmed and shown off to relatives. "Yes, do it again," my mom yelled before putting them both on the couch together and getting Liam to knock her off again, clapping each time like she was watching a circus act. And when I tried to wrap my arms around Maya to protect her from the pain I knew so well, they made fun of me, calling me dramatic, telling me to stop babying her. After that, Maya became more like my daughter than my sister, because even though my other 2 sisters were just as hated, I knew they always had each other, so they would be okay. But Maya, she only had me, so I never gave in to the whole propaganda thing of worshipping Liam like he was some sort of celebrity. I never just thought it was okay for Maya to be forgotten about, for her birthdays to be uncelebrated, for her to cry alone in her room at just 6 years old because our parents said tears would toughen her up. And even though I was just 5 years older than her, I actually had a lot of wisdom to give. I raised her to be a hard worker, someone who prioritizes focus and discipline over dumb high school drama. I quizzed her on her spelling words at the kitchen table while our parents watched television in the next room. I sat with her over algebra homework long after I should have gone to bed myself. She grew to be an academic weapon, so I wasn't even surprised when she graduated as valedictorian of her grade. Meanwhile, Liam, who was also in her grade, graduated with a 1.2 GPA, 4 ex-girlfriends, and nothing to show for his time than a high Snapchat score and a suspension for cheating on a chemistry final. But still, at their graduation, I was the only one to cheer for Maya. Standing up so fast, my chair scraped loudly against the gymnasium floor when they called her name. Meanwhile, when Liam came on stage, my parents screamed so hard I thought their lungs were about to fall out of their throats, my mother actually standing on her seat to get a better photo. My parents insisted on fully funding Liam's community college tuition and told Maya she would have to pay every penny herself, working nights at a diner to cover what financial aid didn't. By this point, Liam was a spoiled, entitled brat, so when he heard this news, he just smirked and said, "It's about time she learned to do something by herself for once." It was painfully obvious that the real world was going to eat him alive. And of course, I was right, because 2 months later, I got a call from Liam. I instantly knew something was very wrong, because he was being extremely polite to me without even asking me for anything. "Hey, can we talk? I really need your help with something," he said, his voice unusually soft, almost rehearsed. "Liam, what's going on?" I asked. My tone was impatient and a little rude, because a polite Liam was never a good sign. He told me that my parents had given him walking around money. Money meant to last him the entire year until May at college. This equated to $50,000. My heart dropped. "I spent the entire thing already, and now I have nothing. Can you help me?" I instantly hung up, my hand shaking around the phone. These were the same parents who didn't let me shower more than twice a week to save on the water bill. The same parents who didn't let any of my sisters eat more than a single portion of food at dinner, while Liam got seconds and thirds without asking. I thought we were broke, but I didn't blame Liam. I blamed my parents because they're adults, and they were the reason Liam is, well, Liam. Except things didn't finish there, because Liam took my rejection as a reason to start a personal vendetta against me. 2 days later, I noticed that my entire bank account had been drained, all in one transfer. I was sitting in my small apartment when I saw it, the one I'd worked so hard to afford on my own with no help from anyone. I'd just gotten home from a double shift, my feet aching in my worn work shoes, my back sore from hours on my feet. I'd kicked the shoes off at the door and collapsed onto my secondhand couch, pulling out my phone to check if my paycheck had cleared yet. That's when I saw it. I stared at my phone screen, blinking hard to make sure I wasn't seeing things, tilting the phone toward the lamp like the light might somehow change the number. My account balance read 0 points, white row. My hand started shaking so badly, I dropped my phone onto my lap. This couldn't be happening. I had just over $3,400 in there. My rent money, grocery money, and the small emergency fund I'd been building for over a year, all gone in an instant. The room seemed to spin around me, the walls of my small apartment pressing in closer than usual. The $3,400 represented countless early mornings, late nights, skipped lunches, and passed up social invitations. Every dollar had been earned through sacrifice and discipline, the very values I'd taught Maya at that same kitchen transaction table years ago. Now, it had vanished in an instant. I called my bank immediately, my voice cracking as I explained the situation to the customer service rep. She put me on hold to check the transaction details. Those 5 minutes of waiting felt like 5 hours, my stomach twisting tighter with each passing second. The hold music played in my ear, a cheerful melody that felt like a cruel joke against the backdrop of my panic. I paced my small living room, the worn carpet rough under my bare feet, 3 steps one way, 3 steps back, over and over, like an animal in a cage far too small for it. My mind raced through possibilities. A bank error, identity theft, a mistake I'd somehow made myself, but deep down, I already knew. When she finally returned, her voice was professionally sympathetic as she confirmed my worst fears. There was a single wire transfer made yesterday afternoon to an account at First National Bank, authorized using my online banking credentials. The customer service representative's voice faded in and out as she explained the details. Transaction time was 2:17 p.m. Confirmation code sent to your email. Successfully authenticated. Each word was another nail in the coffin of my financial security. I glanced at my calendar on the wall. Yesterday, at 2:17 p.m., I had been in a team meeting at work, my phone tucked away in my desk drawer, completely unaware that my financial life was being dismantled in real time. I insisted I hadn't authorized anything, explaining I was at work during that time, my voice rising with a panic I couldn't fully control. The representative assured me they would open a fraud investigation, but warned it could take up to 10 business days to resolve. 10 business days. I mentally calculated my upcoming bills. Rent due in a week, utilities 3 days after that, not to mention groceries and gas. The small digital clock on my microwave seemed to mock me, each minute ticking away, bringing me closer to financial ruin. I thanked the representative, my voice hollow, and ended the call. My phone buzzed with a text just as I hung up. It was Liam. No message, just a photo of him lounging by a hotel pool with a fruity drink in hand, condensation dripping down the glass. The caption read, "College life is stressful, needed a break." The photo showed Liam in designer sunglasses, a fresh gold chain around his neck, one hand wrapped around a glass with a tiny umbrella. Behind him was a crystal blue pool surrounded by palm trees, clearly not the community college campus where he was supposedly struggling with classes. The sunlight glinted off what looked like a brand new watch on his wrist. My money, my hard-earned money, was now sitting on his wrist and funding his poolside vacation, while I sat in an apartment with an empty fridge and a rent payment I couldn't make. My blood boiled as I stared at the image, the connection instantly clear. He was taunting me, flaunting what he'd done with my money like it was some kind of trophy. I texted back demanding he return my money immediately, informing him the bank was investigating the fraud and that I had already called them. My fingers trembled with rage as I typed, making numerous errors I had to go back and correct. Autocorrect turning my furious sentences into something almost comical. The small apartment suddenly felt stifling, and I threw open the window, letting in the cool evening air. A siren wailed in the distance, matching the alarm bells ringing in my head. His reply came almost instantly, feigning ignorance and suggesting I should be more careful with my passwords, followed by a mocking kiss emoji that made my teeth clench. "No idea what you're talking about, big sis. Maybe you should use better passwords than Maya's birthday." So predictable. The casual cruelty of his message made my stomach turn. Not only had he stolen from me, but he'd weaponized my love for Maya to do it, turning the one thing I cared about most into the key that unlocked my own destruction. That's when it hit me. 3 months ago, Liam had asked to borrow my laptop to finish a school project when he visited. I'd stepped out to grab us lunch, leaving him alone with my computer for almost an hour. He must have installed something to track my keystrokes, or accessed my saved passwords while I was gone. I remembered that day clearly now. It had been raining, fat drops pattering against my apartment windows, the kind of gray afternoon that made everything feel slower than it was. Liam had shown up unannounced, claiming his laptop had died and he had an assignment due that night. Against my better judgment, I'd let him in, even offered to make him tea while he worked. He declined the tea, but asked if I could grab us lunch from the deli down the street. "Take your time," he'd said with a smile that now seems sinister in retrospect. "This might take a while." I'd been gone maybe 45 minutes, standing in line behind an elderly man arguing about coupons, returning with sandwiches to find Liam casually browsing social media, claiming he'd already finished his work. I spent the next hour in a panic, changing every password I had, setting up two-factor authentication on every account I could think of, and scanning my devices for spyware with shaking hands. Then I called Maya, who reacted with appropriate outrage when I explained the situation. She pointed out that his text was incriminating evidence and urged me to report him to the police immediately. "Screenshot everything before he deletes it," she said, her voice sharp with an urgency that made me sit up straighter. Maya's voice was steady and mature beyond her years as she talked me through the practical steps I needed to take. I could hear her moving around her dorm room, the sound of drawers opening and closing as she multitasked, likely gathering her own financial documents to make sure they were secure too. "Document everything," she advised. "Screenshot his texts, the bank statement, everything. This isn't just theft, it's identity theft, it's a felony, and you need a paper trail before he has time to cover his tracks." I hesitated, torn between family loyalty and the need for justice, some old childhood instinct still whispering that reporting Liam would somehow make me the bad one. The next day, I drove to my parents' house, rehearsing what I would would say the entire way. The drive to my parents' house was tense, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I passed familiar landmarks, the elementary school Maya and I had attended, the park where I taught her to ride a bike when our parents couldn't be bothered to show up, the ice cream shop where we'd celebrate her good grades with the cheapest cone they sold because it was all I could afford. Each sight strengthened my resolve to stand up for what was right. I expected them to be shocked, maybe even apologetic about raising such an entitled son. I was wrong. Their house looked the same as always, well-maintained on the outside, a perfect facade hiding the dysfunction within. The garden was immaculate with fresh mulch and blooming flowers that my mother tended to with more care than she'd ever shown her daughters. I parked behind my father's new SUV, another reminder of the financial disparities I was just beginning to fully understand. My mother answered the door with a tight smile that disappeared the second she saw my expression. I didn't bother with pleasantries, immediately telling her that Liam had taken every cent from my bank account and that I needed their help getting it back. He what? She said, but her voice lacked any real surprise, more performance than shock. The living room was exactly as I remembered, family photos covering the walls, though I noticed with a pang that most featured Liam alone or with our parents. The few that included us were group shots where we were positioned on the edges, almost as afterthoughts, half cropped out of frame. The familiar scent of my mother's potpourri hung in the air, sickeningly sweet and artificial. My father appeared behind her, arms crossed defensively, suggesting that if I'd helped Liam when he needed it, he wouldn't have had to take matters into his own hands. You know how he gets when he feels ignored, my father said, as if that explained away a felony. His face, with its familiar stern lines and perpetual disapproval, showed not a hint of concern for my situation. He stood in his perfectly pressed khakis and polo shirt, the picture of suburban respectability, while defending what amounted to felony theft. The hypocrisy was staggering. I stood there, mouth open in disbelief, as my mother dismissively claimed they didn't know Liam had done anything wrong and accused me of being jealous of the attention Liam received. You've always been jealous of your brother, my mother said, her voice dripping with condescension. Ever since he was born, you've tried to compete with him. It's not becoming. She smoothed her cardigan, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood confrontations. Besides, family helps family. If Liam needed money, you should have given it to him instead of making him resort to this. I asked her, my voice shaking, if she understood what she was saying, if she realized she was defending a crime. She just pursed her lips and looked away. The conversation deteriorated rapidly from there, ending with me storming out in frustrated tears while my father called after me that I was overreacting, that I'd always had a flair for the dramatic. As I left, I noticed a framed photo I hadn't seen before, Liam in a cap and gown at his high school graduation, my parents beaming beside him. There was no corresponding photo of Maya in her valedictorian regalia anywhere on that wall, no proud display of her academic achievements. This final slight fueled my anger as I slammed the door behind me hard enough to rattle the glass. By the time I got home, I discovered I'd been removed from the family group chat and blocked by both parents on social media. My phone, which had been buzzing with notifications during the drive home, suddenly went completely silent. I checked the family group chat. You can no longer send messages to this group appeared on my screen. A quick check of my parents' profiles showed the blocked user message staring back at me. They had digitally excised me from the family for daring to challenge Liam's behavior, for daring to ask for basic accountability. Later that evening, I received texts from my two middle sisters, Jenna and Tessa, asking what happened. They were shocked, but admitted they felt powerless to stand up to our parents. Jenna's text came first. Mom and Dad are saying you accused Liam of stealing. What's going on? Then Tessa. They're really upset, sis. Dad's talking about ungrateful children again. Are you okay? Their messages held the familiar tone of walking on eggshells, the survival mechanism we'd all developed growing up in that house, where every conflict had to be managed carefully to avoid setting off our parents. Maya called me that night, and before I could even finish explaining my financial situation, she'd sent me $1,200, nearly everything she had saved for tuition. Maya, no, I can't take this, I told her, but she'd already sent it. I promised to pay her back as tears streamed down my face, but she simply reminded me that we take care of each other, as we always had. We're sisters, she said, her voice firm despite her youth. This is what we do. You gave up your 20s raising me. The least I can do is cover your rent for a month. I could hear the determination in her voice, the same resolve that had gotten her through years of being overlooked and undervalued. In that moment, I felt both immense pride in the woman she was becoming and deep sadness that she'd had to grow up so fast, that a 19-year-old was comforting her 24-year-old sister instead of the other way around. The next morning brought a new crisis when I couldn't log into my work email. A call to IT revealed someone had attempted to access our company's server using my credentials, triggering an automatic security lockdown. The IT specialist, a woman named Priya with a gentle voice and technical expertise, walked me through what had happened. The login attempts came from an IP address in the next county over, she explained, pulling up logs as she spoke. They tried several password combinations before the system locked them out automatically. My blood ran cold as I realized how far Liam was willing to go, not just stealing my money, but potentially jeopardizing my entire career over a grudge. I explained the situation to my boss, showing him time-stamped proof I was in a meeting when the login attempt occurred. He believed me, but warned that I needed to resolve my personal issues before they affected my job performance. My boss, a normally understanding man in his 50s, goatees with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perpetually perched on his nose, frowned as he reviewed the evidence I'd presented. "I believe you," he said finally, leaning back in his chair. "But this company can't afford security breaches, understood? Fix this, whatever it is, before it comes near this building again." The implicit threat hung heavy in the air. My job, the only source of income I had left, was now at risk because of Liam's vendetta. That evening, Jenna and Tessa came to my apartment, arms full of takeout containers because none of us had the energy to cook. We spent hours piecing together years of Liam's manipulations, times when items went missing, rumors spread, relationships damaged. We'd always dismissed these incidents individually, but together they formed a clear pattern of calculated behavior that had been happening since childhood. My small living room became command central as we spread out years of evidence across the coffee table, floor, and kitchen counter. Jenna, always the organized one, created a timeline on my whiteboard, color-coding each incident by year. Tessa, with her sharp memory for details, recalled incidents I'd long forgotten. The time my high school boyfriend suddenly broke up with me after Liam accidentally showed him fake texts from my phone. The soccer trophy that mysteriously disappeared the day before a family gathering where I planned to show it off. "Remember when I got accepted to that summer science program?" Tessa said, her voice quiet with realization as she uncapped a marker. "And suddenly Mom and Dad couldn't afford it. But 2 weeks later, Liam got that expensive phone." She shook her head, connecting dots we'd all been too conditioned to see for years. They weren't just playing favorites. They were actively sabotaging us to build him up, one small theft of opportunity at a time. A week later, Jenna discovered through a mutual friend that Liam had a new girlfriend, a well-off student named Emma, whose parents owned several local businesses. We debated for hours what, if anything, we should do about it. Before deciding, I would send an anonymous message to Emma, simply suggesting she be careful about lending money or sharing passwords with him. Jenna showed me Emma's social media profile, a clean-cut young woman with an easy smile and expensive clothes, her feed full of coffee dates and campus events. Her recent posts showed her and Liam at upscale restaurants and exclusive clubs. One photo made my stomach drop. Liam wearing a watch that looked suspiciously like one I'd seen in our grandfather's dresser drawer, a family heirloom that had supposedly been lost years ago after he passed. I sent the message that night, hands trembling, keeping it vague but pointed. The warning backfired spectacularly. Liam somehow figured out I was behind it and told university administrators that Maya had been stalking and threatening him on campus. She was called into a disciplinary meeting that could have derailed her entire academic career over a lie. Maya called me from outside the administration building, her voice tight with controlled panic. "They won't tell me exactly what he's accused me of," she said, her breath uneven. "Just that there's been a serious complaint about threatening behavior, and that it could affect my standing here." I could hear the fear beneath her calm exterior, the effort it took to keep her voice from shaking. Everything she'd worked so hard for was suddenly at risk because of Liam's lies. Thankfully, one of Liam's former roommates, Zane, provided screenshots proving Liam had fabricated the entire story. Zane, a lanky guy with tired eyes and a quiet voice, had lived with Liam briefly before their falling out. "He did the same thing to me," Zane explained when he met with Maya and me at a coffee shop near campus, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "Made up stories, took my things, tried to turn my friends against me. I've been keeping receipts ever since, honestly, because I had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time he pulled something." He slid his phone across the table, showing us a text conversation where Liam explicitly outlined his plan to get Maya in trouble as revenge for the warning to Emma. Reading it in his own words, I felt something cold settle in my chest. The situation escalated further when Tessa discovered a GoFundMe page Liam had created, claiming he was escaping an abusive family situation. The page featured carefully edited photos of old bruises from a skiing accident years ago and raised over $3,000 before we could report it with evidence of fraud. The page was taken down, but Liam faced no real consequences beyond a warning email from the platform. The GoFundMe page had been slickly produced, with professional-looking graphics and a heartbreaking story about supposed physical and emotional abuse. "My sisters have made my life a living hell," the description read. "Now they're trying to prevent me from getting an education and escaping their control. Every dollar helps me get free." Reading those words on Tessa's laptop screen, seeing our family history completely inverted and sold to strangers for sympathy, made me physically ill. I had to close the laptop and walk to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. My financial situation was becoming dire around the same time. My landlord was surprisingly understanding, but he could only give me an extra week before late fees kicked in. Then my car wouldn't start one morning, the mechanic confirming someone had put sugar in the gas tank. The repair would cost nearly $800. The mechanic, an older man with grease-stained hands and honest eyes, showed me the damage on a rag spread across his workbench. "Never seen sugar do this much harm," he said, pointing to the corroded fuel system with a small pick. "Someone really had it out for you, whoever they are." I stood in the repair shop, the smell of oil and rubber filling my nostrils, wondering how much more Liam could possibly take from me before he was satisfied. I filed a police report and installed a security camera outside my apartment, feeling like I was living in a state of siege in my own home. The police officer who took my report was professionally sympathetic, but not particularly helpful. "Family disputes are complicated," she said, her pen moving efficiently across her notepad without much urgency. "Without direct evidence linking linking your brother to the vandalism, there's not much we can do on our end. I nodded, understanding the reality, but still feeling abandoned by yet another system that should have provided some kind of protection. 2 weeks after the initial theft, the bank finally concluded their investigation and confirmed they would refund my money in full. That relief lasted about a day before our Aunt Kathleen called me, beginning the conversation by accusing me of spreading lies about Liam based on what my mother had told her. Aunt Kathleen had always been my mother's closest ally, echoing her opinions and reinforcing her decisions at every family gathering. Her voice on the phone was sharp with disapproval. "Your mother is heartbroken over how you're treating your brother after everything they've done for you girls," she said, not even pausing to let me respond. The familiar refrain made my teeth clench, the implication that providing basic necessities to your children was some extraordinary act of generosity that required lifelong gratitude and silent compliance. After I explained the situation and sent her the evidence I'd compiled, she became an unexpected ally, creating ripples through the extended family as she questioned my parents' version of events out loud at every opportunity. The shift in Aunt Kathleen's tone was dramatic once she reviewed the evidence I'd emailed her. "I had no idea," she said, her voice now hushed with shock, all the earlier sharpness gone. "Your mother always made it sound like you girls were difficult, and Liam was the easy child. This is a lot worse than I thought." I could hear her shuffling papers on the other end, likely looking through the bank statements and screenshots I'd sent her one more time. "This isn't right. None of this is right." Maya called me in a panic one evening to tell me Liam had shown up at her dorm crying, claiming he wanted to make amends. After she turned him away, she overheard him on the phone telling someone she had pushed and threatened him. "He was waiting outside my door when I got back from the library," Maya explained, her voice tight with stress, still catching her breath from having practically run back to her room. All tears and apologies, saying he wanted to fix our relationship, saying he missed me. She described how she'd politely but firmly asked him to leave, then watched through her peephole as he immediately dropped the act, pulling out his phone with a smirk before he'd even reached the elevator. I heard him clearly saying I'd shoved him against the wall and threatened to make him pay. It was surreal, honestly. He was creating the narrative in real time, like he'd rehearsed it. The next morning, I received an anonymous email threatening that Maya would lose her scholarship if I didn't back off. The email arrived at 3:17 a.m., its threatening tone made more ominous by the late hour it was sent. "Your sister's academic future depends on your cooperation," it read. "The scholarship committee would be very interested to learn about her harassment of fellow students. Back off now, or we'll make sure they know everything." The message was sent from a generic email address, but the writing style, with its dramatic flair and excessive punctuation, was unmistakably Liam's. We needed leverage, and we needed it fast. Maya managed to access Liam's old email account, where we found years of correspondence between Liam and our parents discussing money transfers, and even explicit instructions on how to manipulate situations to his advantage. Maya explained how she'd remembered Liam using the same password across multiple platforms, a combination of his birth month and our mother's maiden name, a piece of laziness that would end up being his undoing. "He never thought anyone would try to access his accounts," she said as we scrolled through the emails together, both of us hunched over her laptop at 2 in the morning. "He doesn't realize that his greatest weakness is thinking he's smarter than everyone else." One email from just after my bank account was drained had Liam writing that I couldn't prove anything because he'd used a VPN and my own computer to do it. "Got it done today," Liam had written to our mother. "Used her own laptop through a VPN so it can't be traced back to me. The best part is she'll never be able to prove it was me." Our mother's response was equally disturbing, and I read it 3 times just to make sure I understood it correctly. "Clever boy. She should have helped you when you asked. Maybe this will teach her a lesson about family loyalty." Reading those words, seeing the explicit written approval of theft and fraud from my own mother, was the final confirmation of how twisted our family dynamic truly was. There was no more room for doubt, no more benefit of it either. I compiled everything into a detailed document and created a private, password-protected blog, sending the link to trusted family members one by one. The response was immediate. Relatives began distancing themselves from our parents within days. Liam's girlfriend broke up with him, and without unlimited financial support behind him anymore, he struggled to maintain the lifestyle he'd built on other people's money. The document ran to over 30 pages, meticulously organized with dates, screenshots, and explanations for context. I worked on it for 3 straight days, fueled by coffee and righteous anger, determined to create an undeniable record of the truth that no one could later claim was exaggerated. When it was complete, I sent the password-protected link to select relatives: Aunt Kathleen, our grandparents, 2 uncles who had always been kind to us girls growing up, and a few cousins we were close with and trusted completely. 3 weeks later, my mother asked to meet. She claimed they didn't know how bad things had gotten with Liam, but I corrected her immediately, pointing out that they knew perfectly well and simply didn't care as long as it wasn't affecting them directly. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes with 2 bright lighting and mismatched chairs. My mother looked smaller somehow, sitting there in the corner booth. Her carefully maintained appearance showed signs of strain, dark circles under her eyes, a button misaligned on her cardigan, small details that revealed the cracks forming in her perfect facade. "We just want to fix this," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence, both hands wrapped around a coffee cup she never drank drank from. We're still a family, aren't we? They promised to cut off Liam's extra funding and help Maya with college going forward. Promises that sounded rehearsed even as she said them. But that evening, I received a threatening letter from Liam claiming I'd only made things worse for myself by turning everyone against him. The letter arrived by certified mail, Liam making sure I couldn't later claim I hadn't received it. The envelope contained 3 pages of accusations, threats, and vitriol, the handwriting becoming increasingly erratic and pressed harder into the page as the letter progressed. "You've ruined everything," he wrote on the final page, the ink almost tearing through the paper. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of. This isn't over." The final straw came when Maya discovered that Liam had applied for a job at her company, listing me as a reference using a slightly altered version of my name. Maya forwarded the information to HR along with documentation of his previous false claims, her hands shaking as she compiled the email. The HR director, a woman Maya had built a good relationship with during her internship, called her directly about the application within the hour. "Something seemed off," she explained. "The reference letter was enthusiastic but vague, and the contact information was similar to yours but not quite exact, which raised some flags on our end." Maya immediately recognized it as another of Liam's schemes, this time attempting to infiltrate her workplace, possibly to cause even more damage from the inside. For the first time in this entire ordeal, Liam's actions had real, tangible consequences. He was blacklisted from the company entirely. Weeks later, Maya spotted him working at a local coffee shop, the kind of minimum wage job he'd always looked down on, and mocked us for considering. She simply texted me. Karma finally caught up. The text included a photo taken discreetly through the coffee shop window. There was Liam, wearing a standard issue apron, his hair pulled back under a cap instead of his usual styled look, serving customers with a fixed, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. There was no malice in Maya's message, just a quiet acknowledgement that actions eventually catch up to people, one way or another. 3 weeks after that, my parents sent elaborate gifts to all of us out of nowhere, which felt more like bribes than any genuine expression of love or apology. Maya and I returned them unopened the same afternoon they arrived. Jenna and Tessa kept theirs, but donated the equivalent value to a charity supporting victims of financial abuse, which felt like the most fitting response any of us could have come up with. The gifts had arrived in matching silver paper with elaborate bows, clearly professionally wrapped by someone at a store rather than by our mother's own hands. Mine contained an expensive watch with an inscription on the back, "Family is forever." The irony wasn't lost on me for even a second. Maya's package held a laptop, the very tool she had needed for school that they had refused to help her purchase months earlier when she actually needed it. We packaged them back up the same day they arrived, adding a simple note to the top of the box. "No, thank you." 2 years have passed since then, and last month, my parents finally called the meeting they'd been begging for, wanting us all in one room to rebuild the family. According to Aunt Kathleen, who still keeps us updated occasionally over the phone, Liam had been evicted from his apartment for non-payment of rent months ago and moved back in with our parents, who converted their home office into a bedroom for him, complete with new furniture and decor they definitely couldn't afford for the rest of us growing up. The cycle continues, the patterns unchanged even now. And now, with their golden child broke and back under their roof for good, they suddenly remembered they had 4 daughters worth calling. My mother's voice cracked on the phone as she talked about family, about forgiveness, about how life is too short to hold on to grudges like this one. I let her finish every word without interrupting. Then I told her the truth I'd taken 30 years to fully understand. They didn't lose us the day we walked away from that house for good. They lost us every single day they chose Liam over us. Every birthday they forgot. Every meal they rationed while his plate stayed full. Every time they laughed while one of us cried alone in a bedroom down the hall. We weren't a family they broke in one dramatic moment. We were a family they never once bothered to build in the first place. So no, we won't be rebuilding anything with them, because you cannot rebuild something that was never actually there to begin with. My sisters and I already have our family. We meet every Sunday. 4 chairs that don't match around a table Maya refinished herself with her own 2 hands. And for the first time in our lives, there's no golden child, no forgotten child, just us, exactly as we are. And that is the one thing our parents can never take back, beg for, or buy their way into again. We're done playing their game, and for the first time in our lives, we're the ones who won.